Hurrdat Sports presents Benning Bites with Damon Benning. Benning Bites with Damon Benning.
Another episode of Benning Bites. Show coming up here in just a few minutes. We appreciate you being with us on Coffee and Cream. Ravi Lula in for at least, hold on for one more day. I know that there is sickness, but you... No, I promised you guys last week I wasn't just going to sing songs, but at least one more day till we get Andrew Rogers back. Appreciate you being a part of Coffee and Cream. You may already be. If not, give Ravi a follow at R.A. Lula. That is with 2 L's for those of you that are playing at home. Be a great... I'm not doing that. That would be Shane Bing. Very Shane. Good show coming up tomorrow. We'll talk a little Gophers. Upcoming opponent, we'll have Ron Johnson. We've got Brandon Vogel. We've got Joel Lorenzi. And I think one more, and of course I can't remember because that would mean that I'm being responsible. So we're not going to go ahead and do
John
that.
John Fanta.
John Fanta. Thank you very much, Shane Schillerberg, which means some college hoops heavy, but we're on the heels of a little mini press conference yesterday with Matt Rhule before spring ball starts. He said a lot of things that I think kind of echo the sentiment that we've been trying to talk about for a long time. And I'm hoping you find folks aren't into the kind of this, because I know sometimes with me it can be like, oh, all this psychoanalyzing and this babble. But I'm telling you, I didn't get to be doing what I'm doing just because I like words that don't mean a whole lot, right? There are certain things that I look for that I think matter, that have staying power. And it really helps me hit a high percentage when it comes to predicting things and talking about things. And with Coach Rhule and his staff, I've said this almost from day one. The level of security I think you have to be a high-functioning adult in that room is high. You have to be able to handle some criticisms, have some things said about you that you know come from a good place. And knowing that they come from a good place isn't based on assumption. You will see it in their good works. They hang out together. They talk with one another. They ask you how your day is doing. They break bread with one another. And so when you build up that trust, you can say some things that may ordinarily hurt your feelings. Hey, DB, listen, you need to do X, Y, and Z a little bit differently. And as opposed to me looking at you like, well, how would you know? You don't know me. It's like... oh, man, that's my brother, man. He cares a lot about me. So you heard him say things yesterday in the same 5-minute span. Hey, we have to be careful of labels. You don't want to speak things into existence, but I don't want to go into who was Mr. Irrelevant. He was a starter last year. So the difference between labels and telling people honest truths are, number one, it's probably not the first time that they've heard it, and he or she has probably earned it before. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. So it's very interesting, the dynamics. Remember, I talk a ton about checkers and chess, and he's a quick processor. I mean, when you say things like, before we can teach, we need to learn, I guarantee you're like, well, no kidding. Hey, how many of us actually practice that, though? We've all of a sudden become experts on everything, and we're quick to have an opinion. We listen to respond as opposed to understand. I feel like that's important. And I want to say it again. Before we teach, we need to learn. And there's 2 things in that. Number one, last year I talked ad nauseum about the degree of difficulty, and don't assume real communication is happening until you get feedback, right? The staff had to teach each other, be on the same page, then teach the young people what it was, right? New OC, new offensive wide receivers coach. You have a couple of new position coaches, and so there has to be some learning that goes on. And you have to become the master before you can teach it. You have to know what goes in the textbooks as common language before you want somebody else to read the story. And Nebraska just never quite got there. And I think Coach Rhule and his staff have been more than honest about the learning curve that has to go on before they can teach it to each other. And how about how he talked about common language? I know you guys feel like I'm beating that thing over the head, but it builds in accountability. You cannot have the same shared purpose without having common language. It just doesn't work. And he's hammering that home. You saw the thing about competition and mat drills, and there's going to be some critics out there. And maybe you're all in and you're full-fledged Kool-Aid and drink up. If so, I'm not talking to you. But the counter-argument to that would be, well, how functional is this in football? Can they play? Can they run? Can they tackle? Well, he talked about it. He's like, well, we got to see if what we know here is applicable to football. Can they actually run, jump, and tackle? This looks good over here, but we'll see how it correlates over here in terms of actually playing football. So he's letting you know they're not there yet, even though there's a lot of good things to drink up over here. But you can't get to playing good football and being competitive and physical like he talked about. He says, hey, listen, it's a competitive football team. It's a tough football team. Now we'll see if they can play football. Right? So I think when you're a player and you're hearing that, you're like, okay, what's next? And don't undersell competing every day, being the class on time, being to your drills on time, being accountable. I mean, they've had to swap out new captains. Hey, you know what? Some guys just weren't the captains they thought they were going to be. Or when you're putting a team together. Maybe we were loyal to our position guys, and then we figured out, you may not be the best. You may not be the best fit for us. So player-led accountability, gosh, it's a beautiful thing. It's so freeing because you take the onus of the staff having to police the team. The team will police the team. And the more the team polices the team, the more the coaches just get to coach. And that's the real magic happens. And we'll get to a lot of this on the show with Ravi because he had some great one-liners. He said, a lot of people say absolute power corrupts. I like to say powerless corrupts. And by that he's saying when you don't have the ability to change things, the consequences don't matter. And you just do whatever. Think about that for a second. Maybe it's not absolute power corrupts absolutely. Maybe it's being powerless corrupts, because you've heard me say for about 15 years, when you lose hope, the consequences don't matter. And when you lose the fact that their consequences don't matter, you can't be held accountable. So there's a lot in there. He didn't talk for a lot of time, but he said a lot of what you need to know. So make sure that you're paying attention. Stay tuned for Coffee and Cream coming up. However you get us, Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, television. Continue to get us downloaded. Make sure you're a part of what we're doing. Again, my main man, Ravi Lula, will be back in just a few minutes. It's Coffee and Cream.